The slap came before she could react. It cracked across her face with the sound of something breaking. Not just skin or pride, but the illusion that certain people were safe from humiliation. Her head snapped to the side, and the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. For a breathless second, Riverside Park went silent. Mothers froze mid-stride. Joggers stopped mid-pace. The dog by the fountain stopped barking. Everyone saw it. A police chief had just struck a black woman sitting alone on a park bench. She didn't move. Her cheek throbbed, and she could feel every pair of eyes fixed on her, their shock mixing with the heat of her own humiliation. The man standing before her, face flushed from anger and exertion, leaned closer, his voice low and dripping with disdain. "Know your place." He had no idea who he was speaking to. Brenda Lawrence blinked slowly, tasting copper, forcing herself not to flinch. Her pulse thudded in her temples, but her mind was cold, clear, and calculating. He didn't know. This man, Gerald Hutchinson, chief of police for Asheville, North Carolina, had just hit a woman whose signature appeared on almost every warrant his department had filed for the past decade. He had no clue that the person he'd just humiliated in public was the one judge in the entire county capable of deciding his fate. She sat there, breathing slowly, letting the echo of the slap fade into the distance. Power, she knew, worked best when people underestimated you. Brenda came to this bench often, under the big oak at the edge of the park. It offered good shade and quiet distance from the playground. It was where she went when the weight of the job pressed too hard against her ribs. The folder in her lap that afternoon was thin but heavy. A single file labeled asterisk read, Jamal, 19 years old. Deceased, asterisk. He'd been shot 6 times during a traffic stop 3 weeks earlier. No weapon recovered. No charges filed. The officer claimed he saw Reed reach for something. Witnesses said his hands were up. It wasn't assigned to her courtroom yet, but the city was already boiling with tension. She had watched cases like this come and go, each one followed by a review, a press release, and silence. That was why she'd started drafting the proposal that now rested beside her thermos of coffee. A civilian oversight board with real power, subpoena authority, independent investigators, the ability to recommend terminations and charges. The kind of board that made police unions nervous. It was not popular work. That week alone, she'd received 3 emails from the Police Benevolent Association accusing her of judicial activism. One had hinted at consequences if she pushed too far. She ignored them, as she always did, but the words lingered. Consequences had a particular weight when it came from people with badges and guns. She could be impartial. She had been for 15 years, but impartiality didn't mean blindness. It didn't mean silence. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from her granddaughter, Amara. "Grandma, you still at the park?" A small smile softened her face. Amara was 14, precocious, and more perceptive than most adults Brenda knew. She typed back, asterisk home by 6. "Love you." Asterisk then set the phone aside and returned to her draft. Section 4, Disciplinary Procedures. The words blurred as she tried to decide how far she could go without the city council killing the proposal. Too strong, and it would die in committee. Too weak, and it would become another toothless committee collecting dust in a filing cabinet. She rubbed her temple and thought of her brother, Jerome. He was 51 now, living in a care facility. 16 years ago, 2 officers had pulled him over for a broken taillight. They said he resisted. Witnesses said otherwise. Jerome left that traffic stop with a fractured skull and permanent brain damage. He'd never spoken again. The city settled for $50,000. No admission of wrongdoing. The officers were cleared. One had since retired with a pension. Brenda had become a judge 3 years after that. Not for revenge, but to make sure no one else's brother ended up a check and a memory. She heard footsteps behind her on the gravel path. Steady, heavy. A jogger, she thought at first, until they stopped directly behind her. She glanced up. Gerald Hutchinson stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, his police department T-shirt clinging to his chest. Sweat darkened the collar. Beside him, a German shepherd panted, tongue lolling. No leash. No handler's vest. Just a man, a dog, and a simmering kind of authority. "Afternoon," he said, not friendly. She nodded politely. "Chief." The dog barked suddenly, loud and sharp. Brenda didn't move. The chief didn't call it off. He just stood there, hands on his hips, waiting for something. "Ma'am," he said finally, "you need to move. This is AK-9 training area." Brenda looked around. The park was quiet. No signs, no cones, no other officers in sight. "I don't see any posted notices," she said, keeping her tone level. He stared back, jaw tightening. "I'm telling you now." That was when she realized this wasn't about training. Brenda closed the folder on her lap and rose slowly, deliberately, careful, measured, the way black people in America learn to move when authority hovers too close. No sudden gestures, no sharp tones. She faced him squarely. "Chief Hutchinson," she said evenly, "this is a public park. I've been here for 40 minutes and haven't seen any training exercises." He stepped closer, the dog following, barking again. "I don't need to show you a schedule. Move." "I like to finish my work," she said quietly. 20 minutes. His face darkened. "You think your robe gives you a pass here?" Her pulse flickered. So he did recognize her, or thought he did. Maybe he'd seen her across the courtroom, issuing rulings he didn't like. Maybe he just saw a black woman refusing to obey. Either way, she could hear the contempt beneath his words. "I'm not wearing a robe," she said, keeping her tone calm. "I'm sitting on a public bench." "You know what your problem is?" he snapped, voice rising. "People like you don't respect authority. You sit here with your papers, thinking you're better than everyone else. People like you." There was the mask dropping. Brenda felt something cold settle inside her chest. She kept her expression neutral. "Chief, I don't want trouble." "I don't care what you want," he said. He was close enough now that she could smell sweat and dog fur. "When I tell you to move, you move." From the corner of her eye, she saw motion. Two joggers had slowed about 30 feet away. A couple walking their dog had stopped. An older man near the playground was watching, uncertain but attentive. Witnesses, she thought. Good. Brenda reached carefully in her pocket and pulled out her phone. "I'm going to record this for my safety." Hutchinson's hand shot forward and clamped around her wrist. "No, you're not." "Let go," she said, trying to pull back. "You're hurting me. Give me the phone." "Let go of my arm." He squeezed harder, his other hand reaching. She twisted away, and then the world cracked. His open palm slammed across her cheek. The sound cut through the park like gunfire. She stumbled, catching herself on the bench. Her cheek blazed with heat. Her ears rang. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. She raised her eyes to meet his. "You just assaulted me," she said quietly. He blinked, startled, then recovered with the well-worn reflex of a man who'd rewritten events before. "You were resisting. I was standing still. You tried to hit me with your phone." "I did not. That's not what I saw." His voice rose deliberately now, projecting for the witnesses. "I asked you to leave a restricted area. You became aggressive. I had to defend myself." Brenda didn't argue. She just looked past him, saw the jogger, now holding up a phone, camera pointed straight at them. The couple was doing the same. The older man had stood up, multiple lenses catching what had just happened. Hutchinson hadn't noticed yet. He was too busy spinning his narrative. "I need your identification," he barked. "No," she said firmly. His head snapped up. "What?" "I don't have to show you identification. I haven't committed a crime. You assaulted an officer. We both know I didn't." His jaw flexed. "I'm going to ask one more time." "Chief Hutchinson," she interrupted, voice calm and judicial, the same tone she used when attorneys wasted her time. "I'm leaving. I'm going home, and then I'm filing a formal complaint. I suggest you do the same." She picked up her folder, smoothed her skirt, and walked past him. Her legs trembled, her face throbbed, but she did not run. "Ma'am, we're not done," he called after her. She kept walking. Behind her, the jogger's voice rang out. "Sir, I saw everything." "She didn't touch you." "This doesn't concern you," Hutchinson snapped. "I'm a witness. It concerns me." Brenda reached the parking lot. Her hand shook as she unlocked her car and climbed in. The door shut with a hollow thunk, sealing her in a bubble of silence. For a moment, she just sat there and let herself breathe. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Asterisk, I got it on video. Are you okay? Asterisk. She stared at the message, thumb hovering, then typed back. Asterisk, I'm okay. Please keep that video. Asterisk. 3 dots appeared, then a reply. Asterisk, already uploaded to my cloud. Nobody's deleting this. Asterisk. Brenda leaned back in the seat, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her cheek was already swelling, a red imprint blooming across her dark skin. A thin line of blood marked her lip where her teeth had caught it. He has no idea who I am, she whispered. But by morning, the whole department will. The video spread faster than rumor. By 5:30 that evening, 15 seconds of grainy footage, the slap, her head jerking sideways, the frozen park, had over 40,000 views on Twitter. By 6, it was on TikTok with the tag #AshevillePD. By 6:30, the count had tripled. At 7, local news picked it up with the caption, "Police chief involved in altercation at Riverside Park." The clip was shaky, but unmistakable. A man in a police shirt, a woman sitting on a bench, his hands swinging fast. The sound of contact. Comment sections exploded. Asterisk, there must be context. Asterisk. Asterisk, resign now. Asterisk. Asterisk. How is this happening in 2025? Asterisk. At 6:15, Brenda sat in her kitchen, holding a bag of frozen peas to her cheek. Amara hovered beside her, eyes wide with anger and worry. "Grandma, you need to go to the hospital," she said for the 3rd time. "I'm fine, baby." "You're not fine. Look at your face." Brenda lowered the bag and examined her reflection in a microwave door. The swelling had deepened, purple shadows creeping across her cheekbone. "I'll go tomorrow if it doesn't get worse." "You should call the police," Amara insisted. Brenda almost laughed. "Sweetheart, the police are the problem. Then call a lawyer. Or the news." "Tomorrow," she said softly. "Right now, I need to sit." Her phone buzzed constantly. Colleagues, friends, people she hadn't spoken to in years, all asking the same thing. Asterisk, are you okay? Did you see the video? Is that really you? Asterisk, she hadn't replied to any of them. Not yet. Not while her hands still shook when she tried to lift a glass of water. At 6:45, her phone rang again. The city manager's office. She let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang once more. She declined. A text appeared instead. Asterisk, Judge Lawrence, this is Alan Foster. Please call me at your earliest convenience. We need to discuss today's incident. Asterisk. She turned the phone face down on the table. Grandma, Amara said quietly, scrolling through her screen. People are sharing this everywhere. 300,000 views. And it's still going up. At 7:03, the Asheville Police Department released its official statement. Amara read it aloud. Earlier today, Chief Gerald Hutchinson was involved in an incident at Riverside Park. The chief was conducting a routine K-9 training exercise when he encountered an individual in a restricted area. The individual became verbally aggressive and refused multiple lawful requests to relocate. Chief Hutchinson attempted to de-escalate, but the individual made physical contact with him, forcing him to use a compliance technique to ensure safety. The department will conduct a thorough internal review. When she finished, the kitchen was silent. That's not what happened, Amara said. No, Brenda replied. It's not. So they're just lying. They're protecting their own. That's what they do. What are you going to do? Brenda didn't answer immediately. She just looked down at her hands, steady now, and nodded to herself. I'm going to document everything. Every bruise, every witness. I'm going to create a paper trail so thick they can't bury it. And if that doesn't work, she said, looking up, eyes cold and clear, I'll take it higher. I know how this system works. At 7:30, the doorbell rang. Amara peeked out the window. Grandma, there's a news van outside. Brenda joined her, parting the curtain. A white van with Channel 9's logo sat by the curb. A reporter stood on the sidewalk, camera ready. Her phone rang again, a different number. Judge Lawrence, she answered. Judge, this is Maya Rodriguez from the Asheville Citizen-Times. I'm calling about the incident at Riverside Park. Do you have a moment? Brenda hesitated. She knew that name. The reporter who'd been writing about police reform for years. The one who never backed off when stories got uncomfortable. Not tonight, Brenda said. But call me tomorrow morning. Of course. I just want to make sure you're all right. And to let you know, if you choose to share your side, we'll run it. Thank you, Brenda said. I'll think about it. She hung up, turned to Amara, and said, pack a bag. We're staying with Aunt Patricia tonight. Why? Because by tomorrow morning, this is going to get much bigger, and I need one quiet night before that happens. They packed quickly, clothes, toiletries, Amara's schoolbooks. Brenda slid the Jamal Reed folder into her overnight bag without really knowing why, only that it felt important to keep close. As they slipped out the back door, the glow of the news camera flickered against the front windows. Brenda drove slowly through the winding streets, checking her mirrors more often than necessary. Her hands were steady again, but her mind raced ahead, cataloging every next step. By the time she turned into Patricia Hayes' driveway, 20 minutes later, the video had surpassed 500,000 views. And somewhere across town, Chief Gerald Hutchinson sat alone in his living room, watching the same video play again and again, realizing too late that this wasn't going away. The earthquake hit at dawn. At 6:30 Friday morning, the Asheville Citizen-Times published a headline that detonated across North Carolina. Woman assaulted by police chief identified as Superior Court Judge Brenda Lawrence. The byline belonged to Maya Rodriguez, and the article was concise, devastating, impossible to ignore. It identified Brenda by name and title, presiding judge of the Superior Court, Criminal Division, District 28. 15 years on the bench. Over 200 felony trials involving the Asheville Police Department. Dozens of search warrants, arrest orders, detention reviews, all bearing her signature. The piece quoted a retired attorney. If Chief Hutchinson made an arrest in Asheville, Judge Lawrence's signature is in the file. She's literally the person who decides whether his actions stand or fall under the law. No opinion, no commentary, just the facts, cold, clinical, and lethal to the chief's reputation. Within 30 minutes, the Associated Press had picked it up. Within 2 hours, cable news anchors were reading Maya's words aloud. By mid-morning, the country knew the name Brenda Lawrence. Across town, Chief Gerald Hutchinson sat in his bathrobe at his kitchen counter, staring at his phone as if it were a live grenade. He'd read the article 3 times and still couldn't process it. The woman he'd slapped in the park, the one whose quiet defiance had unnerved him, was a sitting Superior Court judge. He called the city manager, Alan Foster, hands trembling. The call connected on the 4th ring. Tell me you didn't know, Foster said, voice already sharp. I didn't, Hutchinson croaked. I swear, Alan, I didn't know who she was. You slapped a judge, Gerald. A sitting judge. On video. With witnesses. It was a misunderstanding. Foster let out a short, bitter laugh. A misunderstanding? We've had 14 media calls in the last hour. The governor's office wants a briefing by noon, and Judge Lawrence hasn't said a single word, which makes her look like the rational one, while you look exactly like what the video shows. What do I do? Hutchinson asked, his voice small. Get a lawyer. A good one. And pray she wants reform, not revenge. The line went dead. Hutchinson stared at the trending hashtags. Hashtag Riverside Park, hashtag Know Your Place, hashtag Asheville PD, as if they were a death sentence. His name sat beneath them in thousands of tweets. Asterisk, he's been doing this for years and finally hit the wrong person. Imagine how many others never got filmed. Karma wears a gray cardigan. Asterisk. That one stung the most. Asterisk, Karma wears a gray cardigan. Asterisk. It was retweeted 8,000 times before lunch. At the Citizen-Times office, Maya Rodriguez was already 2 steps ahead. She'd been covering police accountability for years, stories that usually sank after a few days of outrage. But this one was different. She'd spent the last 18 months quietly gathering threads on Chief Hutchinson's history. Old complaints, sealed settlements, whispered rumors of misconduct. Now, with a single act of arrogance, he had given her the story that tied them all together. By noon, she had filed Freedom of Information requests for every settlement involving the Asheville Police Department from 2020 to the present. While she waited, she reached out to Lieutenant Craig Donovan, a name she'd kept in her notebook for over a year. Internal Affairs. The kind of officer who still believed the badge should mean integrity. They met at a coffee shop on the west side of town, far from downtown and the cameras. Donovan looked tired. He slid a manila envelope across the table without preamble. "This doesn't come from me," he said. Inside were 14 complaint reports, each one naming or involving Chief Hutchinson. 12 had been cleared after internal review. 2 were still pending. The language was eerily consistent: excessive force, intimidation, racially biased conduct. "Who reviewed these?" Maya asked. "The deputy chief," Donovan said, voice low. "Guess who appointed him?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Hutchinson." "Exactly. He's been clearing his own cases for years. Why are you showing me this?" Donovan leaned back, the weight of exhaustion in his eyes. "Because I joined this department to serve people, not protect someone who thinks he's untouchable. What he did to Judge Lawrence, he's done before. The only difference is this time, someone caught it on camera." Maya photographed every page, thanked him, and promised anonymity. "I'll quote you as a source within internal affairs," she said. "Fine. Just make sure the truth comes out." Monday morning, her public records request came through. The city had paid $680,000 in settlements tied to police misconduct over 4 years, 9 separate cases. 7 of those involved Hutchinson directly. All included non-disclosure agreements. Maya compiled the data into a spreadsheet: case numbers, dates, amounts, redacted names. 2 for excessive force, 3 for wrongful detention, 2 for racial profiling. Every single one cleared internally. Her next headline landed like a hammer. Asheville paid $680,000 to settle police misconduct claims. Chief Hutchinson named in 7. The city's official response was predictable: all settlements handled according to legal guidelines. But the numbers told their own story: a pattern of impunity too large to ignore. That same afternoon, Maya received a call from Riverside Park Management. 2 cameras had recorded the incident from separate angles, both with audio. She drove there immediately, heart pounding. The footage was clearer than the viral cell phone clip. High definition, steady, undeniable. She watched as the chief approached Brenda, the dog barking, the confrontation escalating. And then, in chilling clarity, she heard his voice. "You know what your problem is?" A pause. "People like you don't respect authority. You sit here thinking you're better than everyone else." And then, seconds before the strike: "Why I tell you to move, you move. That's how this works." Followed by the final words that would echo across the country: "You need to know your place." Maya rewound the footage twice to be sure she'd heard it right. The phrase landed like a verdict. Know your place. Given that Brenda was a black woman and Hutchinson a white police chief, the implication needed no explanation. She requested a certified copy of the footage and a signed statement from the park manager confirming its authenticity. That evening, she published again. Park surveillance captures Chief Hutchinson telling Judge Lawrence to know your place before assault. The clip was embedded for readers to hear. Within hours, the phrase became a rallying cry and a scar. Hashtag Know Your Place trended across platforms, quoted by journalists, activists, and politicians. Editorials dissected the words, pointing out their historical weight, a sentence drenched in centuries of hierarchy and hate. By dawn, even national outlets had picked it up. One commentator said, "That phrase alone could be the centerpiece of a civil rights lawsuit." Hutchinson's attorney issued a brief statement. Asterisk, the quote is being taken out of context. Asterisk, but the audio didn't leave room for context. It was what it was contempt made audible. The witnesses began to come forward. Sarah Collins, the jogger who had filmed the first clip, turned out to be an EMT. She filed a sworn affidavit confirming that Judge Lawrence had been sitting peacefully when the chief approached. She'd seen him grab her wrist and strike her. Then came Helen and Tom Richards, the couple walking their dog. Their statements matched Collins's down to the minute. A teenage boy named Kyle Bennett submitted his original cell phone file, complete with metadata verifying the exact time and GPS coordinates. All 3 affidavits were given to the Citizen Times and published as excerpts. Each one told the same story. No provocation, no aggression, just power and arrogance. By Thursday morning, Maya's inbox pinged with an anonymous email. Asterisk, if you want the truth, check your mail. Asterisk. An hour later, a brown envelope arrived at her desk. Inside were printed emails between Chief Hutchinson and City Manager Alan Foster. Messages sent just hours after the assault, before the video had gone viral. 5:02 p.m. Hutchinson asterisk, we have a situation. A woman is claiming I assaulted her. There's a video. 5:09 p.m. Foster asterisk, how bad? 5:11 p.m. Hutchinson asterisk, it looks worse than it was. She was aggressive. I used minimal force. 5:14 p.m. Foster asterisk, do we know who she is? 5:16 p.m. Hutchinson asterisk, no ID. She refused to provide one. 5:23 p.m. Foster asterisk, can we settle this quietly before it gets bigger? 5:28 p.m. Hutchinson asterisk, I'm working on it. Might handle it internally. 5:35 p.m. Foster asterisk, keep me updated. We need this contained. 5:38 p.m. Hutchinson asterisk, understood. I'll take care of it. The exchange was damning. A paper trail of collusion. They hadn't even known Brenda's identity yet, and they were already strategizing how to bury the story. Maya verified the email headers with cybersecurity experts. They were authentic. She reached out to both men for comment. Neither replied. The next morning, her headline burned across the front page. Emails show chief and city manager discuss containing incident hours after assault. By noon, the district attorney's office announced it was convening a grand jury. Not an internal review, but an independent judicial process with the power to indict. Through it all, Brenda Lawrence said nothing. While the internet erupted, while the police union scrambled to defend its leader, while pundits argued about context and political motives, Brenda stayed silent. She spent her days at her mentor Patricia Hayes' home, drinking coffee at the kitchen table, filling legal pads with notes. Patricia, a retired judge herself, studied Brenda's composed face over her mug. You know, everyone's waiting for you to speak, she said. I know. What are you going to say? Brenda set down her pen. Nothing. Not yet. Let them sweat. Let the video do the work. Patricia smiled faintly. You've been planning this. I've been a judge long enough to know that silence can be more powerful than outrage. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Asterisk, ready to talk when you are. Asterisk. Brenda typed back. Asterisk Monday. Exclusive. Asterisk. 3 days. That was all she needed. Enough time for the public to see the pattern. Enough time for the evidence to stack itself. Enough time for Chief Hutchinson to understand exactly how much trouble he was in. Maya spent the weekend assembling the story that would tip the scales from outrage to reckoning. She traced settlements, tracked whistleblowers, confirmed details through every public record she could access. The deeper she dug, the more rot she found. Within 48 hours, she had built a full profile of the department's dysfunction, a culture of loyalty over law, a web of complaints erased by internal reviews. When she was done, the file was 3 inches thick. She called it the pattern. The article went live early Monday morning under the headline, Pattern of Abuse Inside the Asheville Police Department's Culture of Silence. Asterisk, asterisk. The story laid everything bare. The settlements, the ignored complaints, the retaliation against officers who spoke up. Lieutenant Donovan's anonymous quotes appeared near the top. This department protects its own. Every complaint against the chief gets buried before it sees daylight. What happened to Judge Lawrence isn't new. It's just the first time the world could see it. By noon, the governor's office had issued a statement calling for full transparency. 3 city council members publicly demanded that Hutchinson be suspended pending investigation. A civil rights group petitioned for federal oversight. The Asheville Police Union countered with its own press release, defiant, defensive, and tone-deaf. Chief Hutchinson has served this community for over 30 years with distinction. The recent incident is under review. We asked the public to withhold judgment until all facts are known. But the facts were already there, broadcast, verified, undeniable. That evening, as the sun bled across the mountains, Brenda sat in Patricia's living room, her phone buzzing nonstop. She ignored most of the messages. She was waiting for one. When it came, she smiled faintly. Asterisk Maya. Press embargo lifts tomorrow morning. Are you ready? Asterisk. Brenda typed back. Asterisk. I've been ready for 15 years. Asterisk. She looked out the window at the last of the daylight fading beyond the oak trees and thought about her brother Jerome, still trapped in a body that couldn't speak. About Jamal Reed's mother, still waiting for someone to call her son's death unjustified. About every person who had ever been told to know their place. Her silence had done its job. Now it was time for the truth to speak. By Friday morning, the storm had a name: the Lawrence case. Every local paper, national outlet, and primetime commentator was running some version of the same story. A police chief, a public park, a viral video, and a judge who refused to move. But as the noise rose, Brenda Lawrence's silence became its own kind of statement. She hadn't spoken publicly. She hadn't written a word on social media. She didn't have to. The truth was moving on its own. What she didn't yet know was that somewhere inside the Asheville Police Department, the walls were finally starting to crack. In a small office deep inside headquarters, Lieutenant Craig Donovan sat at his desk, staring at the grainy video of his own boss. For years, he'd watched complaints about Chief Hutchinson vanish into bureaucratic black holes. Each time, internal investigations cleared him. Each time, the chief smiled in press conferences, preaching community trust. Donovan had convinced himself there was nothing he could do until now. The video of the slap had forced the door open, and Maya Rodriguez, with her relentless reporting, had shoved it wider. Her latest expose had made Donovan a ghost in his own department. No one spoke to him in the hallways anymore. No one looked him in the eye. He'd crossed an invisible line the moment he helped her. Still, for the first time in years, he felt something close to relief. Across town, Maya was piecing together the next chapter. Her apartment floor was covered in stacks of paper, complaint records, settlement receipts, and the email chain between Hutchinson and Alan Foster that now looked like Exhibit A in a federal case. She'd mapped out the timeline with string and sticky notes, the way detectives do in movies. But this wasn't fiction. This was the anatomy of a cover-up. Every date, every message, every settlement led to one conclusion. The system hadn't failed by accident. It was designed that way. Maya knew the next step was proving intent. She needed evidence that the chief and city officials hadn't just misconduct. They'd actively hidden it. The email exchange was the beginning, but she needed corroboration. A whistleblower, or something that tied their behavior to policy decisions. Late that night, a message popped into her encrypted inbox. Asterisk, you don't know me, but I can help you. Asterisk. Attached was a PDF labeled settlement_summary_EPD_2020-2024_ Maya's pulse quickened. She clicked it open. 9 cases. 7 linked directly to Hutchinson. All with the same pattern. Internal clearance followed by quiet payout. The total matched the city's number, $680,000. But this file contained something the public version didn't. Notations in the margins. Handwritten initials. Yota. Gerald Hutchinson. At the bottom of one page, under the words use of force review, he'd written in blue ink. Handle internally, do not escalate. It was all there. The chief's own handwriting instructing his staff to bury cases. Maya sat back, heart pounding. It wasn't just misconduct anymore. It was obstruction, and it wasn't isolated. By Tuesday morning, she had confirmed the handwriting through 2 independent experts. That afternoon, she published again. Confidential memos reveal Chief Hutchinson personally overrode misconduct reviews. The article hit like a thunderclap. Her story included high-resolution scans of the annotated documents, expert verification, and statements from 2 anonymous officers confirming the chief's interference. Within hours, the district attorney's office released a terse statement. Asterisk, the evidence presented warrants further judicial review. Asterisk, behind closed doors, a grand jury was being assembled. The difference this time was simple. The case wasn't being handled by the same district attorney who worked daily with the police. Brenda had quietly requested a special prosecutor, a retired federal attorney named Clara Hastings. A woman with no ties to Asheville, known statewide for her tenacity. It was a move straight from Brenda's playbook. She understood how institutions protected themselves. If you wanted accountability, you had to cut the infection out by the root. Meanwhile, the pressure on the city manager's office was reaching its breaking point. Alan Foster, who had once sounded so confident on the phone with Hutchinson, now faced reporters shouting questions outside City Hall. "Mr. Foster, did you authorize a cover-up? Why didn't the city suspend the chief sooner? Did you know she was a judge when you sent that email?" He said nothing, just kept walking. But the fear in his eyes told its own story. Inside his office, Foster stared at a resignation draft he'd written and rewritten 6 times. His legal counsel warned him that deleting emails or files now would make things worse. There were federal investigators watching the servers. The U.S. Attorney's Office had already requested access. He poured himself coffee and stared out the window. Across the street, a protest had formed, 100 people holding candles and signs that read accountability for all. Among them were mothers, veterans, high school students. None of them shouting, just standing together in silence. For the first time, Foster realized that silence could be louder than any chant. At Patricia Hayes' home, Brenda read Maya's latest article in quiet astonishment. The evidence was damning. The walls were closing in around Hutchinson. But Brenda's expression didn't change. She simply folded the paper, placed it beside her teacup, and said, "It's moving." Patricia nodded. "You set the dominoes. Now they're falling." "Not fast enough," Brenda murmured. "He still has allies. The union, the council." Patricia studied her. "You've waited 15 years for this kind of reckoning. Don't rush it now. Let the system show what it's made of." Brenda's eyes softened. "That's what I'm afraid of." The next morning, the police union issued a defiant statement. "Stand with Chief Hutchinson. Support our officers. Defend due process." They announced a rally outside City Hall for Monday. Within 12 hours, 300 people had RSVP'd, most of them current or retired officers. Conservative talk shows framed the story as a witch hunt against law enforcement. Some accused Brenda of orchestrating the confrontation to advance her activist agenda. She ignored it. Instead, she focused on the work that had started all of this, the Oversight Board proposal. Her laptop screen glowed late into the night as she refined Section 4. Disciplinary procedures. She added a clause for public reporting, a transparency mechanism requiring every future police investigation to be accessible to civilian review. It was a quiet act of rebellion, but she knew it mattered. Every word she wrote would outlast the news cycle. By Sunday, things took a darker turn. Brenda's home address was leaked online. The thread spread like wildfire, a photo of her front porch, her street name, her house number. The comments were filled with venom. Asterisk, maybe someone should pay her a visit. Asterisk, asterisk, let's see how safe she feels without police protection. Asterisk, Amara found it first. She handed the phone to her grandmother with shaking hands. "They're posting about us, Grandma." Brenda scrolled through the threats silently, jaw tightening. Then she took screenshots of every post, forwarded them to Maya and to the sheriff's office, and set the phone down. "Pack a bag," she said softly. "We're staying with Aunt Patricia again." "How long?" "I don't know." That night, a car circled their street 3 times before disappearing into the dark. A neighbor called the police, but by the time a patrol car arrived, it was gone. Brenda didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, and wondered how justice could feel this fragile. Tuesday morning brought another challenge. A letter arrived from the city attorney's office, polite on the surface, poisonous underneath. Given the ongoing investigation involving the Asheville Police Department, the city respectfully requests that Judge Lawrence recuse herself from all APD-related cases until the matter is resolved. It was a strategic strike. If she recused herself from too many cases, it would look like an admission of bias. If she refused, they'd accuse her of conflict of interest. She called Patricia for counsel. "They're trying to sideline me," she said. "I know," Patricia replied. "So follow the rules, but don't let them take your gavel away. Recuse from anything directly tied to the incident, but nothing more." That afternoon, Brenda filed a formal response. Her letter was short, sharp, and surgical. She would recuse from any case directly involving Chief Hutchinson or the May 23rd incident, but her judicial duties in all other police-related matters would continue, as usual. It was her way of saying, "You won't silence me." At Amara's school, the fallout was starting to reach her too. The counselor called one afternoon, voice apologetic. "Judge Lawrence, I just want you to know some parents have raised concerns about safety. They're worried about publicity." Brenda listened quietly, thanked her, and hung up. That evening, she sat with Amara at Patricia's kitchen table. "I want you to know," she said carefully, "if this gets too hard, if you want me to step back, I will. You're more important than any of this." Amara stared at her grandmother for a long moment, then shook her head. "No, you can't stop. If you stop, it's like those review boards you talk about. All talk, no action. You're different. You can actually change something." Brenda felt her throat tighten. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you," Amara said simply. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, a sound so ordinary, yet now heavy with meaning. Brenda realized this was the real cost of standing up. Not the bruises, not the headlines, but the fear in her granddaughter's eyes. On Thursday, Brenda visited the care facility on the east side of town. She hadn't seen Jerome in 3 weeks. The hallways smelled like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. The walls were painted cheerful yellow, but the cheer felt forced. She signed in, walked to room 118, and found him by the window in his wheelchair. His hands rested limp in his lap, his eyes distant. The nurse spooned applesauce into his mouth, patient and gentle. "Hey, Jerome," Brenda said softly. No response. She sat beside him, holding his hand, warm but unresponsive, and began talking about nothing in particular. The weather, Amara's school, Patricia's garden. He didn't blink, didn't move, didn't seem to know she was there. 16 years ago, he'd been a math teacher with a booming laugh and a love of jazz. Then came the traffic stop, the resistance, the fracture, the silence. The city had called it a tragedy. The officers had called it procedure. The settlement check had called it closure. Brenda called it unfinished business. When she finally stood to leave, her legs felt heavy. She drove home slowly, avoiding the main roads, her mind looping through the same thought. Asterisk, how many families got that same check? How many never got to see justice breathe? Asterisk. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at her laptop. Section 4 of her proposal blinked on the screen. Disciplinary procedures. The same paragraph she'd been working on when Hutchinson slapped her. The words blurred. She closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, and looked at her reflection. The bruise on her cheek had faded to yellow-green. The cut on her lip was gone. But her eyes looked tired, older than they had 2 weeks ago. She thought of Jerome's still face, of the $680,000 in settlements the city had paid while pretending justice had been served, of every headline calling her hero, as if that made up for what she'd lost. And for the first time since that day in the park, she cried. Not quiet tears, real ones, shaking her shoulders, racking her chest. She cried for Jerome, for Jamal Reed, for every name turned into a statistic, for every time silence was mistaken for peace. When the sobs finally subsided, she splashed cold water on her face and met her own eyes in the mirror. They were swollen, red, but clear again. And in that reflection, she saw what Amara had seen all along. Not a victim, but a woman who could still make things change. "If you stop," she whispered to her reflection, "they win." She dried her face, walked back into the living room, and found Patricia sipping tea by the window. "You okay?" Patricia asked gently. Brenda sat beside her. "No, but I will be." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, soft but certain, a promise of a storm still gathering strength. By Friday evening, something extraordinary began to happen. A group of ordinary citizens, a teacher, a librarian, a retired postal worker, organized a candlelight vigil at Riverside Park. The Facebook event read simply, Asterisk stand with Judge Lawrence. Stand against police violence. Asterisk. By 6 o'clock, 800 people had gathered under the same oak tree where the slap had occurred. They held candles and flowers, placing them gently on the bench. No chants, no slogans, just quiet presence. Maya was there, taking photographs. She texted Brenda, "You should see this." Brenda and Amara watched a live stream from Patricia's living room. On screen, the park glowed with soft candlelight. People stood shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed, united not by outrage, but by quiet resolve. A woman stepped to the microphone, Sarah Collins, the EMT who had witnessed everything. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "I saw what happened that day," she said. "I saw a man in power decide a woman sitting peacefully didn't deserve respect. I saw him use violence because he could. Judge Lawrence showed courage. She didn't fight back. She just demanded to be treated like a human being. That shouldn't be revolutionary, but it is." The crowd was silent for a moment, then a single clap echoed, and then another, until the park filled with applause. Brenda wiped at her eyes. Amara whispered, "Look, Grandma. Look how many people came." Brenda couldn't speak. She just nodded, heartful. The next morning, a GoFundMe launched by local activists passed $85,000 in donations. The funds were designated to support other victims of police misconduct in Asheville, those who couldn't afford lawyers or settlements. The ACLU of North Carolina issued a statement offering pro bono legal representation if Brenda chose to file a civil rights suit. And then, in the Citizen Times, a letter appeared, signed by 12 retired judges from across the state, including 2 from the North Carolina Supreme Court. "We have known Judge Brenda Lawrence for years. Her integrity is beyond question, her commitment to justice unwavering. The attempt to discredit her is transparent and shameful. Any suggestion that she should step back from her duties is an attack not just on her, but on the independence of the judiciary itself." That same afternoon, Maya published her next major piece, Chief Hutchinson, a pattern of violence across 3 decades. The article was exhaustive, 2,300 words detailing every complaint, every settlement, every ignored warning. It featured interviews with 5 people who said Hutchinson had used excessive force against them. 4 black. One was a homeless veteran. By evening, the district attorney's office announced that the grand jury would convene Monday morning. And for the first time since the slap, Brenda allowed herself to believe that something might finally change. Not just for her, not even for Jerome or Jamal Reed, but for everyone who had been told, in words or in silence, to asterisk know their place. Asterisk. Monday morning, May 27th, dawned gray and heavy with the weight of expectation. The courthouse that had always been Brenda Lawrence's domain was now the stage for something much larger than any trial she'd presided over. The grand jury convened behind closed doors on the top floor of the Buncombe County Courthouse. 12 citizens, 1 prosecutor, and evidence that had multiplied in the span of a week. Brenda wasn't in the room. She'd recused herself the moment the inquiry touched her name. But she had done something that mattered even more. She'd appointed an independent prosecutor for Charlotte, a retired federal attorney named Clara Hastings, and requested a visiting judge to oversee proceedings. That judge was Patricia Hayes, her mentor, her oldest ally. It was a quiet masterstroke. The same system that had long protected the powerful was now being forced to investigate one of its own, under rules that left no room for manipulation. The grand jury room was still except for the rustle of paper as Hastings laid out the evidence. Video recordings, sworn affidavits, email chains, complaint reports, settlement records. She spoke plainly, methodically, without embellishment. "This isn't a question of perception," she said to the jurors. "It's a question of conduct, of a man's belief that his power placed him beyond consequence." Sarah Collins, the EMT who had filmed the first video, testified first. Her voice was steady as she described what she saw. A woman sitting quietly, a police chief approaching, aggression escalating, and a strike that silenced the park. Then came Helen and Tom Richards, the couple who confirmed every detail. The teenager, Kyle Bennett, submitted the metadata from his video, unedited, time-stamped, irrefutable. Then, the turning point, Lieutenant Craig Donovan took the stand. His decision to appear under oath sent a chill through the department before he even opened his mouth. He detailed the complaint history against Hutchinson. 14 cases, 12 dismissed by the deputy chief Hutchinson had appointed himself. He described intimidation tactics, retaliation against whistleblowers, and a culture of clearing that allowed the chief to operate unchecked. This wasn't an isolated mistake, Donovan said. It was a pattern of behavior protected by structure. And everyone knew it. The jurors listened in silence as the park surveillance footage played. Clear audio, steady picture. The words "people like you" filled the room, followed by the sound of the slap. Then came the email chain between Hutchinson and city manager Alan Foster. The language was unmistakable. We need this contained. The evidence didn't just reveal violence. It revealed intent. When the presentation ended, Hastings didn't lecture or dramatize. She simply said, "You have the facts. You have the law. Your decision will tell this city what kind of justice it believes in." At 4:30 that afternoon, the grand jury returned its decision. A true bill of indictment. 2 counts: assault on a government official and obstruction of justice. The news spread through Asheville like electricity. The man who had once walked into courtrooms as a symbol of authority was now facing the system he'd manipulated for years. By 6:15 that evening, Chief Gerald Hutchinson was taken into custody at his home by 2 county sheriff's deputies, not by Asheville police. His mugshot hit the wire less than an hour later. The same hand that had struck Brenda now clutched a booking card. Bail was set at $50,000. He posted it within hours, but the damage was irreversible. The official statement from the Asheville Police Department arrived just before 8:30. Chief Hutchinson has been placed on unpaid administrative leave pending the outcome of legal proceedings. Captain Raymond Ellis will serve as acting chief. The department has no further comment. The tone was sterile, institutional, the kind of language used to mark a death without saying the word. The police union's response was angrier. They called the indictment a politically motivated escalation and accused the city of sacrificing an honorable officer to appease a mob. But even they couldn't spin the facts away. The grand jury had spoken, and the evidence was public. Brenda was sitting at Patricia's kitchen table when the news broke. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, colleagues, old friends, judges from across the state. But one message cut through them all. Asterisk Maya. He's been indicted. 2 felonies. Arrested at home. It's happening. Asterisk. Brenda set the phone down. Amara looked up from her homework. What happened? They charged him, Brenda said quietly. He's going to trial. Amara's face brightened. That's good, right? Brenda nodded slowly. Yes. It's a start. She didn't smile. She couldn't. Justice, she knew, wasn't a single moment. It was a long road with no guarantees. But tonight, the first mile had been walked. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for Thursday. It wasn't a trial, but everyone knew it would be treated like one. By dawn, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters. Cameramen jockeyed for position. Protesters and supporters clashed across the street, some holding signs reading "Justice for Brenda," others waving back the blue banners. Inside, the courtroom was packed to the rafters. Every bench filled, every seat claimed. The atmosphere was electric, the kind that makes even whispers feel like thunder. Judge Patricia Hayes presided, her composure unbreakable. To the press, she was impartial authority. To Brenda, watching from chambers down the hall, she was the quiet embodiment of what justice was supposed to look like: calm, fair, and immune to spectacle. Chief Hutchinson sat at the defense table in a dark suit, no badge, no uniform. His once confident posture had deflated into something brittle. Beside him sat his attorney, a well-known defense lawyer from Raleigh who specialized in crisis containment. Across from them, Special Prosecutor Hastings moved with methodical precision. She called her first witness, Sarah Collins. "I saw Chief Hutchinson approach Judge Lawrence," Collins said. She was sitting quietly. He ordered her to move. She didn't. He grabbed her wrist. She told him to let go. He struck her across the face. She never touched him. The defense tried to challenge her distance from the scene. "You were 30 feet away, correct?" "Yes. And you can say with certainty what happened." Collins didn't blink. "Yes." The sound of the slap doesn't leave much room for doubt. Laughter rippled through the spectators. The judge rapped her gavel once. Next came Kyle Bennett, the teenager who'd filmed the viral clip. Nervous but steady, he confirmed that the video was unedited. The defense tried to suggest the footage lacked context. Kyle looked directly at them and said, "The context is a police chief hitting someone." Then came Donovan. The courtroom shifted when he took the stand. A serving officer testifying against his chief was almost unheard of. He carried a folder thick with reports. "I've submitted documentation showing 14 complaints involving Chief Hutchinson," he said. 12 cleared internally, each one reviewed by a deputy he personally appointed. The pattern is consistent: excessive force, intimidation, and racial profiling. The defense objected. "Your Honor, this is character testimony unrelated to the incident." Judge Hayes overruled. "The witness is establishing behavioral pattern and motive." "Proceed." Donovan opened another folder. These internal memos include the chief's handwriting. "Handle internally. Do not escalate." He was referring to active use of force complaints. The jury pool gasped. Then came the final piece of evidence. Hastings played the surveillance footage. The court fell silent. On screen, Hutchinson's voice filled the room. "You know what your problem is? People like you don't respect authority. You sit here thinking you're better than everyone else." Then the slap, and then the quiet words that had ignited a movement. "You need to know your place." The sound echoed through the courtroom like judgment itself. The prosecutor followed with the email chain between Hutchinson and Foster, their attempt to contain the situation before they even knew who she was. When Hastings rested her case, the evidence lay before everyone like a confession written in daylight. The defense lawyer stood, voice measured but strained. "Your Honor, this was a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control. The chief was conducting a legitimate training exercise. Judge Lawrence was not in uniform or identifying herself as a public official. The video doesn't capture the full interaction." "Enough," Hayes said gently but firmly. "We've all seen the full interaction." 5 minutes later, she delivered her ruling. "The court finds that probable cause exists. The matter will proceed to trial. The defendant will remain on bail under existing conditions." One strike of the gavel. Sharp. Final. The sound that had once symbolized authority now marked accountability. Outside, the courthouse steps erupted. Reporters swarmed. Hutchinson walked out between his lawyers, head down, refusing to answer questions. His attorney muttered something about due process, but no one was listening. The cameras had already shifted toward the courthouse door, where Brenda appeared, calm and composed. Maya Rodriguez stood near the front of the crowd. "Judge Lawrence," she called. "Can we get a statement?" Brenda paused, considering her words. "I'm grateful that the legal process is being allowed to unfold without interference," she said finally. "That's all any of us should ask for: accountability under the law. Nothing more, nothing less." She turned to leave, then stopped and added, "Accountability isn't revenge. It's the gavel falling where it should." The quote led the evening news. The following week, Chief Hutchinson resigned. His letter was brief, formulaic. "After 30 years of service, I have decided to spend more time with my family." No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence, the kind that speaks of defeat. On June 3rd, the Asheville City Council voted 7-2 to approve the Civilian Oversight Board, the very measure Brenda had been writing when Hutchinson attacked her. The final version included everything she'd fought for: subpoena power, independent investigators, public reporting, and the authority to recommend criminal charges when warranted. That afternoon, she sat in her courtroom, pen poised above the ordinance. The press was gathered quietly outside, but inside it was just her, the paper, and the weight of 15 years of persistence. She signed her name. In that moment, the law became more than words. It became a promise. That evening, Brenda and Amara returned home for the first time in weeks. The house smelled faintly of dust and old coffee, but it felt safe again. They ate dinner together at the same kitchen table where frozen peas had once pressed against her bruised cheek. "Grandma," Amara asked between bites, "did we win?" Brenda looked at her granddaughter for a long moment. Hutchinson resigned. The board passed. That's progress. But did we win? Brenda smiled faintly. We're still here. That's the first win. What's the second? Next time, Brenda said, maybe it won't take a video. Maybe the system works before someone gets hurt. You think it will? She paused, then nodded. I think we made it possible. Outside, dusk settled over Asheville. The sounds of life drifted through the open window. Children playing, cars humming, a dog barking in the distance. Ordinary sounds, the kind that make peace feel real again. Brenda leaned back, closing her eyes. The fight wasn't over, but the city had shifted. Something deep and long suppressed had been forced into the light. Tomorrow, she would return to her courtroom, to the quiet work of bending the law toward justice one case at a time. It wouldn't be glamorous. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest. Because sometimes courage doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it just wears a gray cardigan and refuses to move. By the time the news of Chief Hutchinson's resignation hit the morning broadcasts, Asheville felt different. The air carried a strange mix of vindication and unease, a city exhaling after years of holding its breath. For weeks, people had marched, argued, prayed, and written their hearts out online. They'd watched videos, read affidavits, memorized timelines. They'd seen a police chief become the defendant and a quiet judge become the moral center of a storm she never asked for. Now the man who once ruled the city's law enforcement was gone, his badge surrendered, his career over. Yet Brenda Lawrence didn't celebrate. She knew better than anyone that justice was not a headline. It was a habit. She returned to work the following Monday, walking through the courthouse doors with the same calm stride she'd always had. No cameras followed her inside. No reporters shouted questions. She preferred it that way. Inside her chambers, the desk was exactly as she had left it. Clean, orderly, untouched. A single document sat in the center. The ordinance establishing the Civilian Oversight Board, her signature drying across the bottom in blue ink. The law was now official. It granted subpoena power, independent investigators, and public transparency. Everything the old Oversight Committee lacked. For the first time in the city's history, civilians could hold the police to account. When she signed it, she didn't think of politics or legacy. She thought of Jamal Reed, 19, shot 6 times during a routine stop. She thought of Jerome, her brother, silenced by brain damage and time. She thought of every parent who'd walked into her courtroom searching for fairness and left with paperwork instead. That morning, as she sat in her chair, the weight of what had changed began to settle in. Across town, the newly formed Civilian Oversight Board held its first meeting. A dozen community members, teachers, social workers, clergy, one retired officer, gathered in a municipal conference room. The mood was solemn, determined. On the whiteboard at the front, 3 words had been written in bold black marker. Asterisk truth. Accountability. Trust. Asterisk. Maya Rodriguez was there too, notebook open, documenting the historic moment. The board's first case was already waiting. The state versus Chief Gerald Hutchinson. It was poetic symmetry. The man who had tried to silence accountability was now its first subject. The board voted unanimously to recommend that the city cooperate fully with the state prosecutor and release all relevant documents to the public. For decades, such files have been sealed under personnel confidentiality. That changed with a single clause in the new law, one Brenda had written herself. In the weeks that followed, Brenda's name became synonymous with quiet courage. Not the loud, performative kind that burned hot and vanished, but the steady kind that reshaped the world by persistence alone. She gave no interviews. She made no speeches. But her face, calm, unflinching, dignified, appeared in newspapers across the country beneath headlines about reform. One national outlet called her Asterisk the judge who changed Asheville. Asterisk. Another simply wrote, Asterisk the woman who wouldn't move. Asterisk. She ignored them all. When colleagues congratulated her, she smiled politely and changed the subject. The work isn't finished, she would say, and she meant it. Because even as the system bent toward accountability, it still resisted every inch of the way. The trial of Gerald Hutchinson began 2 months later, in midsummer. The courthouse buzzed with attention once again. But this time, Brenda wasn't part of it. Not as a witness, not as a judge. She had chosen to stay far from the spotlight, watching events unfold from the quiet of her office down the hall. Judge Patricia Hayes presided again, steady and resolute. The prosecution presented its case efficiently. The footage, the witnesses, the internal memos, the email chain, the handwriting that proved intent. The defense, desperate, leaned on character. They painted Hutchinson as a man, under pressure, a victim of political hysteria. But each time they tried to twist the narrative, the evidence pulled them back to truth. And then came the moment everyone remembered, when Special Prosecutor Clara Hastings played the audio one final time. You know what your problem is? People like you don't respect authority. You need to know your place. Those words echoed through the courtroom again, crisp and undeniable. When the verdict came, it was almost anticlimactic. Guilty on both counts. The courtroom erupted in silence. Not cheers, not gasps, just the collective breath of people who had waited too long to believe that accountability was possible. Hutchinson's sentence was 5 years in prison, reduced to 3 for cooperation and no prior record. It wasn't enough for some. It was too much for others. But for Brenda, it was exactly what the law prescribed. Not vengeance, but consequence. That night, she sat in her living room, lights low, the hum of summer cicadas filtering through the open window. Amara curled up beside her on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "They're talking about you again," Amara said softly. "Everyone's saying you changed the city." Brenda smiled faintly. "Cities don't change because of one person, baby. They change because enough people stop pretending they can't." "You really think people will keep fighting?" Brenda looked out the window at the darkening sky. "They have to. Justice isn't something you finish. It's something you maintain." Amara rested her head on her grandmother's shoulder. "Like a garden?" Brenda nodded. "Exactly like a garden." They sat that way for a long time. No words, just the sound of night and the steady rhythm of 2 generations breathing in sync. The following week, Brenda returned to the care facility to see Jerome. He was sitting by the window, as always, his hands folded loosely in his lap. The nurse greeted her quietly, then left them alone. "Hey, big brother," she said, taking his hand. "It's done. The chief's been convicted. The board passed. Things are changing." Jerome didn't respond. His eyes stayed on the sunlight streaming through the blinds. But she imagined that somewhere, deep inside that quiet body, a part of him heard her. "I used to think justice meant punishing people," she whispered. "But now I think it's about making sure no one else has to live like this. Maybe that's what you've been trying to teach me all along." She kissed his forehead and stayed a little longer, humming softly under her breath. When she left, she paused at the door and looked back one last time. For the first time in years, she didn't feel anger, just peace and purpose. Across Asheville, new things began to bloom in the wake of her fight. The city council approved funding for body cameras and independent review software. Police academy recruits began taking mandatory bias and ethics training designed by the Civilian Oversight Board. Community meetings that had once drawn a handful of activists now filled entire gymnasiums. For the first time, officers began showing up too, not to defend themselves, but to listen. Maya Rodriguez continued her reporting, now focused on a larger question. What does accountability look like after the cameras stop rolling? Her series, The Long Work, won a National Journalism Award and was later cited in congressional hearings on law enforcement reform. In one of her follow-up articles, she wrote, "What began with a slap has become a city's awakening. Justice did not come from rage, but from resolve. It came from a woman who chose composure over chaos, and in doing so, forced a system to see itself." Brenda never commented on the article, but she cut it out of a newspaper and slipped it into the same folder that had once held Jamal Reed's case. Summer gave way to autumn. The leaves along Riverside Park turned gold, drifting down over the same bench where everything had begun. One Saturday afternoon, Brenda returned there for the first time since that day. She came alone, wearing her usual gray cardigan, the air brisk against her skin. The bench looked the same, weathered, ordinary, but someone had left flowers on it. White lilies, fresh. A small card sat beneath them. Thank you for standing. She sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. The park was quiet again. Children laughed in the distance. Joggers passed by, dogs barked. Life had moved on, but the memory still hummed beneath the surface. She closed her eyes, letting the sunlight warm her face. The spot that once burned with pain now held something softer, acceptance. For the first time, she didn't see herself as the woman who'd been struck. She saw herself as the woman who'd kept sitting. Later that evening, Maya stopped by her chambers to deliver something. It's the transcript, she said, from the legislative session. They quoted you. Brenda frowned slightly. Quoted me? I haven't spoken to them. Maya smiled. You didn't have to. One of the council members read your statement from the court steps. Accountability isn't revenge. It's the gavel falling where it should. They're using it as the opening line for a statewide bill on civilian oversight. Brenda blinked, surprised, then laughed quietly. I suppose that's one way to make policy. History, actually, Maya said. Brenda waved a hand dismissively. Don't make me a symbol, Maya. Symbols fade. Systems last. Maya nodded, understanding. Then let's make sure the system remembers. Months passed. Life, as it does, began to find its rhythm again. In the courtroom, Brenda's docket filled with the usual mix of humanity, thefts, disputes, domestic cases, traffic violations. The small stories of a city trying to function. She treated each one with the same precision and empathy she always had. But something had changed. When officers came to testify, their posture was different, less defensive, more measured. When citizens came forward with grievances, they were heard instead of dismissed. And every so often, during recess, someone would linger by the door and whisper, "Thank you, Judge," before slipping away. It wasn't fame. It was acknowledgement, quiet, sincere, human. On the first anniversary of the incident, the city held a candlelight vigil at Riverside Park. This time, it wasn't organized by activists or officials. It was organized by the people. Teachers, students, nurses, veterans. 800 candles flickered under the oak tree. Someone had placed a bronze plaque by the bench, in honor of Judge Brenda Lawrence, for reminding us that dignity is power ***. Brenda didn't attend the ceremony. She watched on a live stream with Amara, sitting at their kitchen table. Where her granddaughter saw the plaque, she turned to her with tears in her eyes. That's your bench. Brenda smiled. It belongs to everyone now. They watched as Sarah Collins, the EMT whose video had started everything, stepped to the microphone again. She spoke softly, the way people do when they mean every word. I still remember the sound of that slap, she said. I remember the silence that followed. I remember thinking how easy it would have been for her to shout, to hit back. But she didn't. She just stood up and walked away. And because she did, we all saw what power really looks like. The crowd fell quiet. Then someone began to sing, an old gospel tune, low and steady. One voice became several, then dozens. Brenda closed her eyes and listened. The melody drifted through her living room like a prayer. That night, after Amara had gone to bed, Brenda sat alone on the porch, a blanket around her shoulders, tea cooling beside her. She looked up at the stars and thought about everything that had happened. The slap, the video, the grand jury, the trial, the reform. She thought about how pain had become policy, and how one act of arrogance had become the catalyst for change. She whispered a quiet prayer, not for vengeance or victory, but for endurance. Because she knew there would always be another case, another name, another battle. But she also knew something else now, that the truth, once seen, could never be unseen again. In the months that followed, other cities began to model their oversight boards after Asheville's. Legislators cited the Lawrence reforms in state discussions. Universities invited Brenda to speak about judicial ethics and systemic accountability, but she declined them all. She preferred her courtroom, the steady rhythm of cases, the quiet dignity of service. The real work, she always said, wasn't in the headlines. It was in the hearings no one televised. Her courtroom became known for something rare, fairness that was felt. Lawyers stopped grandstanding. Officers treated witnesses with care. Defendants, even when found guilty, left knowing they'd been heard. It was as if the entire room had absorbed her unspoken rule. Power is not for display. It's for restraint. One evening, as she locked up her chambers, she noticed a folded note slipped under the door. No name, just handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it and read, "Because of you, I stayed. I was going to quit the force after what happened, but your courage reminded me why I joined. Not everyone wears the badge wrong. Thank you for reminding us what right looks like." There was no signature. She didn't need one. She tucked the note into her pocket and turned off the lights. 2 years later, on a cool spring morning, a law student from Chapel Hill came to interview her for a research paper. He was nervous, fumbling with his recorder. "Judge Lawrence," he said, "how did you find the strength to keep going when everyone was against you?" She smiled gently. "You don't wait for strength, son. You build it. One decision at a time. One truth at a time. Justice isn't lightning. It's brickwork." The student nodded, scribbling frantically. "And what do you want people to remember most about what happened?" Brenda looked out the window toward the rising sun, the light spilling across her desk. "That silence doesn't mean surrender," she said. "Sometimes it's the sound of someone gathering the courage to stand." That evening, she walked home through the courthouse steps as the city lights blinked on. The oak trees along the street swayed gently in the wind. She could hear laughter from the nearby park, children playing, the same sound she'd heard the day she was struck. But now it carried no fear. She paused by the courthouse door, looked back at the fading sky, and allowed herself a small, rare smile. The world wasn't perfect. It never would be. But somewhere between pain and persistence, she had found proof that people could change, that systems could be rebuilt, that courage, even quiet courage, could move mountains. She unlocked her car, slipped inside, and whispered into the still air. Sometimes courage doesn't wear a badge. Sometimes it just wears a gray cardigan and refuses to move. The engine hummed to life, steady and calm, as the city lights reflected on her windshield. A quiet judge driving home through the city she had changed forever.